The common thing in non-duality scenes is that people, first you get to a stage where you recognize the witness of experience. And the witness is a necessary step, because until you recognize that there's even something experiencing, it's very hard to disentangle and understand reality without first separating reality again. So first we create duality, then we believe duality is fundamentally real. That's what causes suffering. And in order to see the truth of experience, which is caused by the inevitable consequence of suffering, we realize that one of the stages of seeing that truth behind suffering, behind reality, is actually creating another duality. So instead of the duality between objects, it's a duality between the world and the observer of the world. And that duality is an intentional, intelligent duality. A lot of people will disregard experiencing being the witness of the world for the purposes of, giving a higher truth, which is necessary, and it's what I'm about to do, and I want to give you an experience of that. But first you have to kind of break down the fundamentals of the previous understanding. Previous understanding being there's a world and you are the witness of the world. Now, the step beyond that, the greater truth than that, is to see that there is no actual witness of a world, because the witness and the world are the same thing. And you can only have a witness if there's a subject and an object relationship. So in the process of dissolving the separation between that, you don't want to dissolve the fact that you experience having a subject and an object relationship, because that is an experience that is legitimate as well, you see? This is the world where we have relationships. The problem that we face isn't the fact that that's experienced, it's the fact that we think that is fundamentally the nature of experience. When we believe that is the fundamental nature of experience, that creates what we call separation. Separation and duality are not the same thing. So just because you can perceive duality, it doesn't mean necessarily you're in ignorance. It's in ignorance if you believe duality is real. First we create a dual world, then we create duality intentionally between the witness and the world. But the witness is always created as this object. When we objectify the subject, we create an entity again. So the next step would be to see that the entity that is witnessing isn't an object. Now, the beautiful thing when you see that is that you realize if you're not an object, you can't be experiencing a subject or an object. Subjects have to be static somewhere. Objects have to be somewhere also. So if you're not an entity that is physical or limited, you can't be a subject to an experience, and neither can the experience be objectified to you. So what you find is that if you right now in your experience see this, there's no actual center of what you would call yourself. So you've heard in Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta talk about the I am. The I am is basically the experience to which you get the evidence that you exist. Now, most people believe they get that evidence from their body. My heart's beating, my lungs are breathing, there's the evidence, right? That's not actually true. You know you exist without needing a body. And how do we know that? By the sheer fact that your existence is known causelessly. If you ask yourself, how do you know you exist? Yes, you know your heart's beating, you know your lungs are breathing, but you don't actually know those things. You see, you don't know your lungs are breathing, you experience sensations, you experience perceptions. These sensations and perceptions, they're just sensations and perceptions. They don't give you clarity on you existing, you see? You know you're existing because you know you are. And because you exist, you know there's existence, you see? You don't know there's existence, then know you exist, because otherwise, how do you know you exist? There has to be first a self-referral phenomenon. That self-referral phenomenon is what we call the I am. That I am is what Nisargadatta talks about. When he says the I am, go beyond the I am, what he means is go beyond the sense of the I am being a limited entity experience. The I am is the absolute, the true I am is behind all thought and perception in the sheer fact that you are. And the place you get that experience from is what you are. Now, if that's what you are, you're not a subject to anything, because a subject has to be somewhere with an object. You're not somewhere to experience an object. The next thing to contemplate is infinity, right? Once we understand infinity, we realize how it applies to our experience. Infinity has to be understood as a negative. You can only understand infinity doesn't mean loads of stuff, doesn't mean a lot of time, really long time, doesn't mean a lot of big stuff. Infinity means the transcendence of a lot of time, or transcendence of a lot of big stuff. It's beyond big, it's beyond small, it's beyond distances, it's beyond space, it's beyond lengths of time. It's transcendent of things, you see? So it's the absence of objects. If something like that exists, this would have to be the requirements. It would have to be, and it would have to not have anything, you see? It would have to have nothing, yet still be. How crazy is that? Process this for a minute. It would have to be, but not have anything to it. Well, something like that is what we call something that doesn't exist, right? So the requirements for something that truly and fundamentally exists is the fact that it doesn't exist. Do you see the paradox with that? How do we reconcile this? Well, the term we have for existence is something we can prove is. Usually, we prove things exist because they have limited qualities that we identify. So if I say, this exists, someone says, how do you know? Because it's pink, it's square, it's got a lock on it, it's got this thing, I can prove it with measurable qualities. If something truly exists that is infinite, you cannot prove it by proving its finite qualities because it won't have any. So how do we recognize something that is infinite if it doesn't have any qualities? How can you see that? Because technically you can't in the conventional way. So we have to upgrade our thinking here. We have to learn to see in a different way before we see in a different way. How do we upgrade that way of thinking? We stop referring to experiences with an objective taste. So in other words, stop looking for things that have measurable finite qualities. Start rendering your experience to be sensitive to something that is without having finite qualities. How do we do that? Well, this is how we started the video. Recognizing the fact you exist over the fact that you don't. That is something that is, but doesn't have any finite limited qualities to identify. This is why, if you ask yourself the question, do I exist? The answer will always be yes. And if you've asked the answer earnestly, if I then ask the question, how do you know? You won't know how you know. The reason you don't know how you know you exist is because you cannot identify it in the same way you identify limited things. Usually, like we said, I know this exists because it has this, this, and this quality. It's measurable. You can't measure the fact that you exist with finite qualities. Therefore, you can't give reasons, because guess where reasons exist? In time and space. Guess where existence exists? Outside time and space. So you can't measure it in the same way you measure other things, which means the realization of what you are transcends your need to prove it to anybody else, because you can't. To understand the nature of reality, you have to surrender the fact that somebody else is going to prove it to you, which means it's a very, very lonely journey to truth. It means you have to learn to trust yourself above anybody else. It means that the old way of thinking is that somebody else is going to do it for you or show you, or a guru is going to enlighten. That's the reason why most people seek for so long, is because they wait for someone else to give them the insight of their own true nature, when the one thing you have to let go of is letting anybody else tell you anything else about what is true for you, about your experience. So to summarize this video, in the essence of it, the fact you exist is a taste of experience. When I say a taste of experience, it's a new flavor of experience that we have to acclimatize to in order to realize that that has no limitation. Once you accept the implications that you do not have any limitation, that's when you're free. What else could you be other than infinite? The minute you accept that, seeing that is one thing, accepting the implications of that is another thing. So what will happen is your nervous system will either say one of two things. Oh my God, this is absolutely profound, and you won't be able to handle it because it's like a truth that is far greater than what we can actually imagine. Or you'll just say, what, that? Oh no, that's too boring, that's not enough. In both ends of the spectrum, you are rejecting something that is fundamentally true based on the fact that the implications of what it means, if it is true, are massive. So notice this when you do these types of explorations. When you recognize that your true nature is fundamentally non-objective and infinite, you are the entire experience. There is no separation between you and the world. The world is literally made of the stuff you are. Because if there is something infinite, there can't be anything else other than that thing. This is what non-duality is about. Seeing that everything is absolute. There's no subject experiencing an object. Subject and object are one. Wave and ocean and water are the same thing. So just like the screen on your phone right now has one image, one screen, and nothing is separate, so too is the same for your experience. If you accept the implications of that, that is what you will actually see. I have a free community, the link's in the description. If you'd like to check that out, I do free calls every single week. If you'd like to chat to me, if you'd like to ask me questions, that's the best place to do it. Anyone else, if you have questions, you want to leave it in the comments. I'm going to be doing videos where I respond to the comments. So you can leave questions there as well, and I'll come back to you with the video. That's about it. Thank you very much. Take care.